Hi, everybody. Lieutenant Joe Pangaro here for True Security Design and Pangaro Training. One of the things that we're all dealing with in law enforcement today is the changing demands on the actual profession of law enforcement. What do our communities want out of us? What do they expect from us? What has changed over the years? And where are we going forward? How are we going to provide the service that our communities need, all of our communities, all across the country, everywhere? How do we provide that service to everyone in the most appropriate way? Now, we know that every community is different. Communities have different understandings of what they want, understanding of their own experiences. One of the things I talk about to police officers when I try and train them is that if we only look at the world through our own eyes and our own life experience, we're missing a great deal of information that we need to have. So if somebody came to my house and they didn't understand, our family dynamic, and they only compared what they saw going on in my house to what they think is a normal, regular family, they're going to have a different point of view than understanding who I am and what my family is about. So as we go through this, I started to say, how can I help law enforcement come together with our communities to have a better understanding of each other? Now, I'm not one of them diversity for diversity's sake kind of thing. Let's just all hold hands and talk nonsense. We need to really have a real conversation about this so that we can properly interact with each other. So we have safe, secure communities for everyone in our country. All right. So to do that, I said, let me reach out to some experts that I know from law enforcement that I trust and that have a tremendous voice out there in the world. So with me today is we have retired Captain Donna Hernandez from Caldwell. She'll tell you about herself, and Lieutenant George Corbin from Asbury Park. And George will give you his rundown too. So why don't we start with Donna? Donna, welcome aboard and tell everybody who you are.
Thank you, Joe. I'm Donna-Roman Hernandez. I'm a retired police captain who served 30 years in law enforcement in Essex County, New Jersey, first with the Essex County Police Department, and then I finished my career with the Caldwell Police Department. Post-retirement, I'm an independent filmmaker, author, and columnist, and also train police officers, collaborate with others, Joe Pangaro and his company, and try to make a difference in the world through my experiences, life experiences, and my abilities to train police officers.
Thank you, Donna. That's excellent. And I got to tell you, if you have not seen or heard Donna present, she is absolutely amazing. She touches the hearts of people in ways that, I thought I was pretty good, but I've seen her in action, and she really connects to her audience and brings home the message. So, Don, I'm glad you're here. And my friend, Lieutenant George Corbin. George, welcome aboard. Tell us a little bit about you.
Thank you. Thank you, Joe. Retired from Asbury Park Police Department as a lieutenant. I retired in 2012 when they were playing around with the pension reform. But anyway, my impact, I thought I can go away and just retire but I was contacted by, let's go back a little bit. I was ahead of the community policing unit back in the early 90s. And I actually sat next to the police director at that time because I wrote the grants, $4 million worth of grants, hiring half the people in the police department who's the leadership now. But during that time frame, I joined and formed a lot of partnerships. I thought I can retire and go away. Some of those partnerships are still bothering me today, I should say. And a local pastor got a hold of me and said, George, that's when the spike in shootings was up in Asbury Park in 2013. And he said, George, we got to do something. I said, I'm in France. No, I'm only kidding. And so I joined with him. We formed an action group called the Asbury Park Community Action Network, where we had everyone. We combined the entire community, including the community at large, law enforcement, the educational community, law enforcement, all the way up to the governor of New Jersey at the time, who came to visit us. And from there, crime in 2014 went down to its lowest in years because we collaboratively attacked the root causes of the violence, which we identified. So today, I'm still being called upon. The 200 Club just called me and put me on the advisory committee. I played Santa at the Christmas tree lighting in the hood, and so working with Joe. But all the experiences that we have, I don't want it to go to waste. So Joe's out there leading the charge, the banner waver of training new and young officers and what's expected out of them. But of course, we've been looking at the headlines lately, and the police aren't looked upon in a great light like we did in 9/11. Joe, I think you were there during 9/11. You went up. Yep. We were the heroes back then. People wore NYPD hats and everything. Now, according to the media, we're the zeros now. So we got to get back on top. Thank you, Joe, for inviting me.
Well, thank you, George, and Donna, thank you. And I say, you know, when I look at this, and how do I bring this together? What makes a credible voice? Okay, a credible voice is someone who has to have experience in the communities that are affected. All right, I know you two both know me and the way I deal with people. I treat everyone as a person. I respect every human being. I value every human life. And it doesn't matter where you come from, your socioeconomic background, your race, your creed, your religion. I don't care. I treat people as people. And that's a good thing. But I come from one type of a community. So how do I speak to every community? You and Donna are from different communities. And that's why I want to reach out and bring all of us together here, because this is what's needed. We need to come together and actually have a conversation and not talk about having a conversation. One of the things that I find, and I'm writing an article about this now, is that we all talk about let's get together on this. Let's really talk turkey. Let's get the truth out there and work. And the truth only goes as far as until I don't want something to come out about me that maybe is not good. So therefore, now I get defensive and I shut you down. Well, the reality is, and this is my point of view, and I'd like to ask both of you if you see it this way, the first place this conversation has to start is by looking inward. I have to look at me and say, what do I add negatively to the conversation? Do I look at things just from my point of view? Do I look negatively at other communities because they're different than mine? And if I'm doing that, I'm not bringing a valid point of view to the table. So I say we have to look inward first. But that is also where you get problems, because if I look inward and I see a flaw, I don't want to talk about it, and I don't want you to talk about it. And that usually ends the conversation. We have to be vulnerable to each other in a way that we can say these things. We can talk about things that are going on in our own communities so that we can get together. Would you agree with that, Donna?
Oh, most definitely, Joe. You said everything so transparent about yourself, and I appreciate that. I wish that we as a world, we as a cult, one big culture of different diverse people would be transparent with each other. We all have historical trauma and historical baggage ancestrally. Just speaking about myself, being a Latina, multicultural person, I grew up in the city of Newark. I didn't know what bias was, prejudice, discrimination, because I grew up with a kaleidoscope of people from different cultures, different ethnicities. And as kids, we just played and had fun. It wasn't until I went to high school that I understand that certain groups of young people were not allowed to attend certain schools. So a law was changed to allow some other diverse communities to come into the school that I was in. And then I started to see, that there were cultural differences, and not every student was receptive to it because of the way they were brought up culturally. So I think that as police officers, we do have to have the ability to think outside the box. If we have a prejudice or we have a bias, it doesn't belong. It doesn't belong in the law enforcement world that we work in. We're free to feel anything we want to feel in this world. I mean, we're people, we're human beings. We have various trauma also that impacts our thought process. But when you put on that uniform and you raise your hand to serve and protect, Whatever cultural biases you might have, you need to leave them at your home.
Yep.
But when you
I
come on
agree.
the job, you are there, as you said, to protect and serve everyone equally and fairly. Because police officers today are being watched, self-watched, body
Mhm.
cameras on poles. In county, city have cameras for traffic conditions and other things. So, there's the truth lies always in the middle of the story. And now it's with video.
Right. And Donna, that's a
And
great point.
yeah, it could be career ending. Making a decision based on biased or prejudiced against someone could be career ending when
Right.
it comes to being a law enforcement officer.
And it should be, because that's, first of all, it's not the right way to interact with other people. Now, I loved when you said a kaleidoscope, Donna, because that is absolutely true. I mean, if you look at us right here, the three of us are a kaleidoscope. All right. You
Yeah.
said you're a Latina. George, you're an African-American man. I'm a white man. But we're all just people? And aren't we also another group? Aren't we also a blue group? Doesn't matter what our backgrounds are. We're also blue, and we are treated differently because of our group by community members in different communities. Some don't like the police. George, you made that point. We're not that popular right now. But the reality is we've gone from heroes to zeros, and we're going to go back because they're going to need us. We already see the ridiculous amount of crime that's been allowed to go on when people have berated the law enforcement community. And we see these things. So when we look at our own backgrounds, that's important to know who we are, to understand where we've made mistakes. Donna, you made so many good points there. We do all have historical things that we bring to the table, good and bad. And that's part of the concern about actually admitting some of those things. What have we done that we have added to the problem? And I look at that and I say, if we can't get past that, then we can't have that conversation. We have to accept there are sins of the past, which brings me to the next point that I'd like to ask you about. And George, I asked you, first of all, if you agreed with my point. So why don't you go? Did you agree with my point that, we really need to accept who we are and be out there together?
Well, it starts with the man in the mirror. And it starts with us and preparing yourself prior to going on duty. Preparing yourself for whatever may come. And it starts from within. So you got to go grab deep down inside, whatever your faith may be. You got to grab your morality. You got to grab certain things, and you got to put that vest on, not just to protect yourselves against flying bullets, but what you're going to encounter. You got to protect yourself from what you inside the police department as well as out in the community itself. The culture, and that's what it is, a police culture. We shouldn't see color within our departments. We do, though, but we have to look at ourselves as being blue. Mm-hmm. And the camaraderie, the teamwork, together everyone achieves more. We have to use that approach. And I use that in my leadership approach to the police department. And it depends upon the leaders, even the leaders of the city, the politicians. They've got to come on board. As you can see, the politics have taken the life out of law enforcement, negative politics, I should say.
And I think your point there, George, is spot on, and that's exactly what I'm talking about. We all have to look at where all of the problems come from, and we can't just point fingers outward. We have to look what problems are we causing. So I guess the follow-up question to that is we have to address this thing of sins of the past, because we can't seem to get past it. And that's another major obstacle, because once we start to have a conversation, then it turns into, oh yeah, well, look what you did to me, look what you owe me. And then everyone turns it around, and that's the end of the conversation again. So, and I'll ask this question out to the two of you again, is when I say we have to accept that bad things have gone on between all our communities. That's just the reality. There's been good things and bad things. I had a situation in my life where I had family members beloved to me. And there was a family situation that happened, and we didn't speak for over 30 years. And I harbored an anger against them because of what they did and what they said and what they didn't do and say. And it got to the point where that anger and that pain was so much a part of my life. I had to let it go. And I found that the gift of forgiveness, when I could forgive them, that broke the dam. And I had to say, okay, they did something to me in the past, but I have to forgive for that if we're going to move forward. Now, it doesn't mean we don't address the pains or the sins. It just means instead of using the sins as a cudgel to hit each other with, we accept there are things that happened. Let's forgive now. And how do we move forward from here? Because if we just keep arguing this, we're going to argue hundreds of years of sins. We're never going to be able to go forward. George, you agree with that?
I agree wholeheartedly, because what I found out is the police relations in particular communities is almost generational, starting with the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, whatever, as long as they pass down the stories. So we have to do some serious debunking of that. We have to start anew. We have to go into these communities and we have to literally start anew, start fresh, a whole fresh approach. And as the older guys, myself and some of the other guys have retired, we got a bunch of new college educated young troops coming on that don't know their buttholes from holes in the ground. So unfortunately, they need the guidance, the positive guidance. We saw the negative side. Oh my God, thank God we didn't have cameras back then. But they're in a whole different light now. So they've got to get in there and they've got to not change it, rearrange it a little bit when they do approach some of these communities. Their approach to them, not the old approach, a new approach, a new idea. A new communication level that they can get in there, get the job done, and get out of there, leaving smiles instead of frowns and tears.
Outstanding. And Donna, where do you stand? Am I right? Does my argument hold water? I mean, how long do we hold these grudges? Do we ever get to move ahead if we don't at least put them on hold and work on going forward? What do you think?
I agree totally with your concept. Communication is key. And forgiving someone is a road hard traveled. I know from my own personal experiences with my father and the domestic violence in my household. I think we as individuals during this time of the pandemic and COVID, it kind of has equaled the playing field of humanity, because the virus doesn't care who you are, where you come from, what your cultural background is. It's just relentless in its infection. And we don't know how much time we have to control this. So we have to make best of the time that we have. And communication, solid communication, transparency, and honesty go a very long way with paying homage to the sins of the father, so to speak, sins that have been done, because we are an imperfect society.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes the media contributes to hyping situations and not de-escalating them. And we shouldn't, as law enforcement retirees or those on the job, fall prey to that.
Right.
There's only one world that I know that we live in, and it's called Earth.
Right. We're all in this together is basically the idea. So if we kind of agree on that, and I don't speak for the white community, George, you don't speak for the black community, Don, you don't speak for the Hispanic community. We're three individuals, though, trying to come to grips with this. When we look at our communities, what do the communities have to do? I mean, we can do all of this, mea culpas on our part, and we're all going to do the right thing as cops, and we're going to treat people differently, and we're going to try and do this. What do our communities have to do to meet us? See, because it has to be a meeting. It can't be that, well, you have been wrong forever, and therefore we're never going to meet you until you meet all our demands. How do we go forward? George, what do you think? What do our communities have to do?
They have to have community leadership lacks. So we, as police officers, we have to be neutral, and we have to find a neutral ground, which we've done, utilizing churches, for instance, within the community. Communities of color usually have a church on every block. these are the locations where you can invite people to in a non-threatening manner. Those that can come to meet with one another. We can actually lead those meetings as law enforcement. We can actually be there in support of those meetings. But how to start in those to get everyone ideas is to survey those respective communities, find out what they want, what they need, and compile it all, hosting some sort of meeting. I'm being technical, but hosting something where they all can come together and share those ideas or address whatever their needs are. They won't even know some of them.
Right.
It's
Okay.
Peter following Paul.
Right. So Donna, every community needs a couple of things, right? Don't we all need security? Don't we want our kids to walk the street safely? Don't we want our elderly people to be able to go take a train if they have to take a train and not get bashed over the skull and their stuff taken and stolen? I mean, what are the commonalities that every community needs? I mean, maybe we start with commonalities. What do we need for all of us?
Well, we need to respect each other's diversities and cultures. And in communities, everyone should have a seat at the table, which is a form of reparations, because for many years, Latinos have been stereotyped, illegals. You don't belong in this country, especially the Puerto Rican community, who are citizens, natural born citizens of this country. Debunking those myths is not easy to do. Mm-hmm. Yes, all communities want safe communities, but the enforcers of the communities have to understand that there are different needs in different communities. When I worked in the city of Newark, when I worked in the town of Caldwell, and as a county police officer, I worked in 21 other municipalities. I understood that there were cultural differences, economic differences, many types of differences. But the bottom line is, as we have said, and George and you have said as well, is that we are people. We do want to live in a community of harmony, but it does take a lot of work. And I agree that bringing communities together, asking the questions, what are the needs of your communities? Right. How can we better serve your communities? And how can we encourage representation by way in governmental roles?
Right.
To ensure that there is another voice at that table. It's not just a quick fix measure. It takes a lot of time. As George said, leadership needs to be on board. The tone has to be set.
Right. Now, what about my point, though, that I can see that happening? We're going to have this meeting. We're going to talk about what's the community need and, how do we go forward? And then the old arguments, the old saws are going to come up again. Well, you always do this and you always do that, as opposed to, okay, where do we go forward? And that's why I'm asking, what does the community have to do that? What mindset do they have to take going forward to make this all work?
Well, they have to pretty much. They probably feel powerless, particularly in the African American and the Latino community. They don't have a voice. City Hall or the city fathers or the mayor and council really don't. Particularly, like say in the city of Asbury Park, they don't listen to you until you erupt your community one way, shape, or form. It is said that if you don't show a child love in his community, respective community, they will burn the town down to feel its warmth. So it's very, very important that the people become stakeholders, that they count. And remember, our uniform being blue, we have to be neutral. We have to be neutral, and we have to use charm. We have to smile. We have to use not the command voice. We have to kind of like use the soft voice and understand the economic situation that they're in. Their pain, their suffering, the housing that is substandard. We can get code enforcement. It's just different powers within the community that we can we can kind of like introduce them to. And so our role is the role in today's policing is going to be very, very important.
Sure.
More important than it has ever been.
So let's look at maybe one of the things that concerns right now. We're seeing what they're doing to law enforcement. This whole, defund the police, get rid of all the cops. We've seen what that does. When you remove the law enforcement from the community, we'll see criminals will be criminals, no matter who they are, and they'll take advantage. With this defunding the police and this no bail situation, Donna, what value does it have to a community who might feel they're over policed, but now the cops are out of the neighborhood, nobody gets put in jail, nobody gets put bail? What does that do to the good and decent people in the community who now are absolute victims of the criminals there, and the cops are no longer proactive? They're doing what they're being told, backing off and just answering their calls. What does that do to a community? What value does that have?
It doesn't have any value because the police are the enforcers of the community. Just look at a community that doesn't have the amount of police officers that they need to enforce. That's just a microscopic view of when there's layoffs, crime does increase. The bad guys read the papers, they listen to the media, they know what's going on in their community if there's cutbacks. So I just would like to just relay an experience that I had very quickly with a program that Equal Justice USA, which I have collaborated with over the years. They put forward a pilot program called Trauma to Trust, where they brought law enforcement officers and community members together to talk about things that are going on in the community that the community might not be favorable about, and the law enforcement officers might not be able to enforce because of whatever factors. It was about 20 to 25 equally sided law enforcement and community members. I was a part of that collaborative, and certain partnership training or training building partnerships was discussed. And then it was down to brass tacks, where the community could express to these police officers in the community that they serve, and most of the officers lived in the community, what trauma has done to them to impact the way they felt about police. Whether it was historical trauma, present trauma, a family member was arrested and the community members didn't feel that the arrest was valid. And it was contentious conversations, sometimes rose to loud voices and people posturing. But through the community relations building model that it was based on, it was okay to express honesty, but not express violence. Mm-hmm. And everyone left, including me, with a renewed sense of value for the importance of honesty and communications and expressions without violence.
Right.
So things can work if programs are set in motion. However, defunding the police is not the way, and not the way to pivot in the times that we're in. We're trying to bring community and police together, not further separate them,
right,
or what's commonly called, culture canceling the culture, or cultural canceling. We need cultural competency. Mm-hmm. That's what we need.
Right. And the more we know about each other's cultures, the less mystifying it is, and you can deal with it. But I think there's some myths. When we talk about myths about what we think about different communities, I agree. We got to get rid of those. I'll tell a personal story I had, Donna. I was, when I went back to the patrol division as a lieutenant, and I was working on a Sunday afternoon, and I'm driving around to a big apartment complex we have, and it's surrounded by woods. And I come around the back, and there's a huge Hispanic community that lives in this apartment complex. And I come around the corner, and there was probably 10 or 15 people outside. They had cut down a bunch of trees in the woods, and they had created they were roasting a pig on a spit. And they saw me come around the corner, and immediately I could see the fear in their eyes that, because first of all, they cut down somebody's woods. Now they have an open fire. I didn't care. They weren't going to burn the place down. That's where they live. And I thought it was pretty cool. I got out. I talked to everybody. They invited me to come back and have dinner with them later on. I wish I could have, but I got to know people. And when they saw me, then they would wave. Hey, so we broke that down. George, I want to ask you this, though. When it comes to breaking down myths, don't we have to also have our communities understand that if you disagree, with a cop arresting you, that doesn't mean you get to punch him in the face and resist arrest. It means you submit to the arrest and you deal with it in court.
In court.
Is that
And
correct?
that's the magic word. Yeah, that's the magic word, that they have recourse. That they have recourse. They don't have to just, okay, go along with the police. Don't resist, because right now, under the climate of policing, that's unfortunately what the community looks at what's going on in another city, disrespecting, shooting at police, ambushing, and things of that nature. They think that's their recourse. And the politicians are serving the police sunny side up, unfortunately. And the media, of course, has got a lot to do with it by portraying the police as less than, we're violent, we shoot people, and things of that nature. So we got a lot to climb out of, and as far as law enforcement.
Right.
I know I'm all over the map, but all these ideas are floating around in my head.
I know. And it's a lot of it is messaging, right? It's messaging to the cops and to the community.
If you have to show that you care, and that's the key. People they don't remember what you say, they remember how you made them feel.
Mm-hmm.
Well, each officer is an ambassador to their respective police department. And they have to represent them well. If they don't represent, you go to a call and you don't represent very well, you're going to get, most likely, you're going to get a recall to that very same location.
Mm-hmm.
And that second officer, your follow-up officer, or whatever shift he's on, is going to catch hell.
Mm-hmm.
Based on that first officer's response. So we got so much work to do.
So Donna, it sounds to me like, listening to you and George, one of the key takeaways for cops here, and for our politicians, or politricksters, as George calls them, people need to be heard. If you're not heard, that'll build frustration and anger. And if the community has a concern that there can be some heavy-handed policing, and we all know from being cops that when you go into certain areas, you go in there with more anticipation that there could be violence, you could get hurt, that there's going to be problems, as opposed to other communities you walk into, you're not really worried about it, right? So that can lead to some of the over-policing, the overzealous activities, the absolute snap of the line. You said that, boom, you're going, because you know what? Cops are just men and women. And they see what's happening now. Well, when I first started, it was unheard of that an officer would be ambushed. It happened, but it was so rare. Today, it happens every single day. Every single day, a cop eating a sandwich is going to get shot in the face. And there seems to be no real impetus that that's a bad thing. We really shouldn't do that. That's what the cops get for being the cops. These are, in that way, that's the broad brush that I say, if the cops were to say, well, that community is all criminals. Well, that's a broad brush. That's inappropriate. But the other way around, well, them cops, they're all bad and they deserve what they get because of what happened 100 years ago or 2 weeks ago that some cop did. How is that right, Donna? Does that give us, how do we help the community to understand we're not those people, other than us being nice to them? What do the community leaders have to say to the community about respecting law enforcement?
We don't want to stereotype the community, nor should the community stereotype us. It has to be a two-way street. And respect. Respect is the key to everything. And leaders in communities should set the tone, should say, these are good cops. This incident happened because it was poor judgment or whatever. I don't defend poor judgment as a person. And as a cop, I tried my best every day to see the best in everyone. But there are bad people in the world. That's it. Mm-hmm. And there are cops that do make bad decisions. However, I would say it's much fewer. If you look at the names on the wall, I believe it's now over 17,000 names on the wall in Washington, D.C. at the memorial. Those police officers went to work to do good in their communities, and their lives were taken. I don't know of any law enforcement officers that I've met throughout my career that go to work to look for the bad in people. Mm-hmm. I've not met one yet.
Right.
I don't know any law enforcement officers that want their families to be at their graveside.
No.
When they've been killed in the line of duty.
I agree.
So we have social media, which can light fires about things. Something could be said on social media and believed.
Right.
You have the internet. We have so much today that can set fire
Right.
to something that doesn't need to be lit.
And
And
that's,
community leaders have to step up and not look for their own gains,
right.
but do what they're supposed to do.
That's part of the problem. Just like the media, it sells much more airtime. It sells much everything to go in and say, George the cop just hated this community, and therefore he went in and did this. And then we find out months later, after there's problems, there's community violence, that's not what happened at all. But
Yes.
It was built up that way. Now, your point, Donna, is right. And I started this out by saying we all have to look inward. As a law enforcement officer for my whole adult career, I'll say there are some cops that shouldn't be cops. There absolutely are. They got bad attitudes. They don't look at things the right way. They do the wrong. But that number, and I hate saying it over and over, is so small, it's ridiculous, because I've been on the inside and I know who's there. I know that cop is not a good person. And everybody else here is trying to do the right thing. To different levels, everybody does the right thing. The community is the same way. When I see bad things happening in communities, especially our minority communities, that I can imagine must feel isolated and alone, that nobody's helping them. And you see a little girl sitting in her bedroom and get shot in the head by somebody driving by. And you see somebody victimized, an old person. I think of these people, they're good and decent people. They're my American brothers and sisters, and they can't walk down their street. That's not something we should play with anymore. We can't say, well, it's really not a problem. It's this. Every community should be safe, period. The problem is, how do we go about doing that? So, George, I know you remember Prosecutor John Kay back in the day when he started the anti-crime unit, the drug unit.
And you were on that, weren't you?
Yes. It was an interesting time because there was so much crime and violence in Asbury Park, and the prosecutor's office was asked to come in and help the PD to clean it up. And I remember he was brilliant. He called the church leaders together. He called everyone together and said, we're going to come into town. We're going to address the drug problem and the crime problem, but that means we're going to arrest people. If people resist, they're going to get arrested. They're going to have a problem, and we're not going to do it if you're not going to support us. And the community said, hey, thanks for coming to us. Do your job. And it worked wonders. It was amazing, the community support that there was, because the good and decent people stuck in the community saw help coming, and they worked together. And I thought that was a great model. I always have my whole career of how to hear people's voice, but to make sure everybody knows the rules. That police work is not a pretty business. It's not pretty. No. If I go to you, George, and say you're under arrest and you don't want to go, we're going to be fighting. And only one of the two of us is right in the fight. And that would be the cop, because I have a duty to take you into custody. You don't have a duty to fight me, but it looks ugly. So that's kind of where I think we need to go here. And this has been a very good conversation. It's a good start. It's a good start to the conversation. I know, Donna, you do a lot of work with the city of Newark. We were recently, Donna and I did a training for some security officers in Newark schools, and your connection to them was absolutely amazing, because you know the community, and you do stuff with the violence, a violence group you have. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Thank you, Joe. I formed violence intervention and prevention specialist when I was still on the job. I didn't do much active training, but when I retired, I knew that my life experiences with the domestic violence in my own home, what I had experienced as a child growing up in an inner city, I could, as George had mentioned before, put that back out into the world, the goodness that you can do, and survivorship and trauma and all of those things. So Newark is my home base. I not only am active in the Latino community, I'm active in with the Black Ministers Association. I'm active in the Italian American population. I mean, wherever there's a need to bring goodness forth and do awareness training, incorporating what I do with my film company, Blue Force Films, is a win-win for me. I survived 30 years in the patrol division, working in many different communities, because I learned from a lieutenant when I was 18 years old and worked for the Newark Police Department as a civilian. He told me that we are intake. We bring someone who has done something wrong in front of a judge. We are not there to give the justice to that person, nor to make that person feel anything else. It's a legal system that then takes it and hands it off and does what they need to do within the criminal justice system. For me, it's always been seeing anyone as I see myself. I know what it's like to be a victim of crime over and over again with domestic violence. I know how it feels to be alone as a woman in policing, because when I came on the job, there weren't a lot of me. So I do look at life as a blessing, putting out good. If the good is not received, that is not something I'm responsible for. And as I said, I'm not the judge and the jury. And I've always used that throughout my life,
Right.
is that if you put good out there, it does return to you.
I think that's a good lesson in karma.
That's a universal law, and it is karma. People don't understand karma. And I'm still receiving the blessings from what I put out during my career. Still getting those phone calls, the recognition. Even the 4 years I worked at Neptune High School as a school cop. Unreal. I run into the kids here and there, and they just remember me. They got smiles on their faces. I said, wow. I'm amazed at the blessings that I was able to put out there and the blessing that comes back. And that's something that we can teach the young officers, that what you put out comes back on you.
It absolutely does.
Karma.
Yep. So, all right, this has been excellent. And I want to hold you for just a couple more minutes because I want to do kind of a lightning round here. I have a set of questions that I've asked you both to answer, and I'm going to mold them into an article at some point. But if we could do like a lightning round, maybe 25 seconds per answer, just to get you right off the top of your head with these questions. So I'll start with Donna. What are the truths that you know from experience on why police and the community have bad interactions?
That the community has probably seen or personally experienced a bad interaction. And that doesn't mean that all cops react that way. That we have to give each other the fair play here. Respect first, communication, and transparency, and then make a decision based off of that.
Right. So what you're saying is maybe the community has seen an arrest go bad and they're concerned it's going to happen to them. And the cops likewise have seen to arrest somebody it went bad and they're anticipating. That's what was my point about anticipating. We have to, see those things. George, how can officers learn about other cultures they are not familiar with?
First, get a snapshot of their particular community. And it's as simple as driving past the respective churches in that area, whether there's synagogues, whether there's mosque, whether there's Christian-based churches, Haitian-based church, Spanish churches. You'll get a snapshot of the community that you have in there. And within each one of those organizations is a leader that can be tapped into. God forbid you need one. So that's one area. And just driving through, getting out the car, literally.
Right. Like my experience watching a pig roast and getting out and talking to everyone and saying, boy, it smelled really good. Now, and Don, I got a question for you, but first I want to go back to your comment about you work with the Black ministers, you work with the Latino community and with the Italian. That if you put together a potluck dinner, that would be unbelievable. If you put those three groups together, that would be something. All right. So what are some cultural differences that can be misinterpreted by an officer if you don't understand someone else's culture? What can be misinterpreted?
What the person is trying to communicate. Because if culture is stereotyped, or they have certain traditions, as you said, a pig roast, and you're not open to understanding what they mean, you got to ask questions. If something is unfamiliar, you should ask questions because the answers might be surprising, bring an awareness piece. And there is a bonding that happens there, as it happened with you, Joe.
Yep, absolutely.
There's a bonding, and you got to see a different side of a culture that may have been misinterpreted in some other way, and goodness came from it rather than acts of violence or anything else.
Yep, that's fantastic. I think you're right. I think of all the time how much fun it is to go to and I don't want to give them a plug, but to go to Disneyland, Epcot Center, and you walk around that big circle and there's all those different cultures. You can have fun in every single one, even if they're not your culture and you don't get why they're dancing like that or why they're eating that food. You can see what it is and enjoy it. And that would be great if we could do that with each other. George, this is a tough one. But let me ask you this. What are some hot words that officers should avoid when they're dealing with people in maybe in different cultures?
You people is one. Here we go again. If I come back, I'm gonna lock everyone up. Nigger, some of the guys reported that. Those are some of the hot words that would escalate. What our job and what it should be is to de-escalate.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll bring everything down, the yelling, the screaming, the fighting, and things of that nature. If not, we'll join that hype. Yep. We'll rise up to their level, and it's not going to be pretty. But right. Those are just some of the words that I sure. think about.
And I tell you, I don't think I wrote about it, but I talked about it in some other places, is that understanding, I may say, well, how come I see people using that word, but I can't use it? And right. You say to yourself, there's words to describe Italian people that are negative. It don't particularly bother me that much, but I don't like to hear it, so I can understand, which is really an epiphany for everyone to understand. If someone doesn't want to hear a description, a certain word that it invokes lots of pain, then just avoid it. Don't use it. Right. Which is why we've adopted the N word instead of saying what you said. But yeah, obviously you can get away with it a little more in our culture.
I can get away with it, but I've heard that and cursing, period. Using curse words instead of being professional. And that's what we want to do. We want to take law enforcement to the level of a profession. It's like going into a doctor's office. You're going to be received by the receptionist. You're going to, have a seat. You're going to wait, quiet circumstance, and wait for the doctor to see you. That's professional. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, we've lowered ourselves and standards to the level of the people that we serve. Mm-hmm. And curse words will come out, or name calling, in a predominantly Hispanic or Latina and Black or African American community. And if you go over to the east side of town, like in Asbury, where they're predominantly homeowners and law-abiding citizens, you're going to use a different language. But it's either incendiary or you can put out a fire with the words that come out of your mouth.
Absolutely. I agree 100%. So that's an excellent one. Donna, we'll got one more each here. How can an officer properly police an area, enforce the laws, and still have the support of the community?
By doing his or her job every day the right way, the same way all day. Fair and equal enforcement of the law. You don't let someone slide because culturally I have a connection with them. People watch the behavior of officers. We're watching people, but I think they're watching the law enforcement officers even more. Mm-hmm. And not being heavy-handed. I mean, if we're saying that we will arrest people for violence, we should not be perpetrating violence or encourage violence or upping a situation that doesn't need to be upped.
Right. And I think that goes with judgment, like you were saying, and experience.
Right. And it really begins at the command level. The chief has to set the tone for the department.
Yes.
Not the mayor.
Right.
The chief sets the tone, or the director, which however it is in the command structure. And then we follow that guidance. If there are red flags in our department, and we see improper conduct and behavior by our brother or sister officers, we should let them know that we feel that that's not right. Mm-hmm. Following or allowing inappropriate behavior just feeds into the stereotype that all cops are the same, that we cover for each other, we've got each other's backs, even in wrong situations. We cannot allow that to be the example of what we stand for.
Right.
And we are paid to do a job, and we know what that job is.
Mhm.
And we can be friendly. It's not all about being mean or stern or posturing. It's great to be friendly with
Mhm.
people. People appreciate that humanistic approach. And in chaos and trauma, people want control. They want people like us, law enforcement officers, to come on scene and make things better,
Mhm.
to get the right services to them, to have empathy for them, to let them know they can have confidence in us, that we have resources to share, that we are there not only to protect, but to serve everyone, including our own families that live in that community.
Right.
So coming together, as you started this all, we have to come together as human beings, show empathies, yes, be the enforcers, be the ones that set the tone for control in situations. We have to, otherwise we'll have chaos in our world.
Yep.
But the bottom line is, no matter what culture we have, when we rest our heads on the pillow at night, we rest as human beings.
Outstanding. All right, George, and I'm going to give you the last one before I wrap this all up. And we've talked about a lot of what the police need to start thinking about, how we need to change what we do and we perceive. We've talked about the community, what they need to know. If there's a community that is suffering a lot of crime,
Right.
what should the police response be to that crime, other than just asking people to be nice and don't commit crimes anymore? What do the police really need to do so that people understand how does a police department handle a crime-ridden area? What do you do there? Do you just let people do it, or do you go in and enforce the law?
Well, enforcing is one thing, training is another, and crime prevention. To go in those communities, respective locations, in each community, you'll find a neutral territory. I used churches back in the day of holding crime prevention seminars. A church is somewhere where an actual a person can come and feel confident to express what's going on in their neighborhood, who the players are. That's where you hand out your business cards with your phone number, and it's intelligence gathering also, which you can take back. The people that commit the crimes in those neighborhoods, they know who it is. It could be a family member of theirs, but crime prevention, the ability to go out and talk to an officer. I was so easily approachable. I used to get the phone call for murder investigations of who the actor or actors were before the Bureau did. Is my approach to the people out there.
Mhm.
And as you get older, as they get older, and I watch them all grow up, they become literally your confidants, your alibis, your friends, literally.
Mhm.
That look, I turned my life around. George, you saved me from hanging myself. Now look at me. I'm in my own business now. I'm amazed at some of the little things that we say and do in the beginning,
Mhm.
how it impacts a person and a community. So I use the churches. At the time, unfortunately, cops are money driven. And Bill Clinton, if he didn't do anything else, he put out the crime bill. Well, not the crime bill. Our current president Biden's put out there back in his day, where we locked everybody up for spitting on the sidewalk. But we actually Bill Clinton actually put out the cops grants,
Mhm.
and we followed the guidelines. I went to DC numerous times, and part of that was crime prevention
Mhm.
and bringing it to the community, utilizing local neutral territories. And I use churches.
Mhm. So I think we're all in agreement that there can be crime prevention, there can be conversations, there also has to be enforcement, and everybody has to understand if we're all going to live safely. Cops didn't come up with this idea. Hey, I think I'm just going to go downtown and I'm going to lock everybody up. We are here because society demands that we have laws to live by, so we live by safe communities. Then someone has to enforce that. So that's why law enforcement was created, to go and enforce the laws that citizens, everyone demands we have so that we can live a nice life together. So you have to have a combination of enforcement, respect, conversation, prevention, all of the things we've talked about here today. But I think we have to, in our next get together, go a little bit deeper into some of the problems and why they exist a little bit more. But I want to thank the two of you very much for being here. This was, I think, enlightening, and I hope it starts the conversation. We'll be together more. I hope everybody got something out of it. If you have any questions, you can certainly reach out to us, info@truesecuritydesign.com. If you have a question for Donna, for myself, or for George, info@truesecuritydesign.com, and we will certainly get an answer back to you. In the meantime, George, thank you for being here. I appreciate it. And Donna, thank you for being here.
You're
Thanks
welcome.
for having us.
Thank
Hey,
you.
and thank you for your service. I appreciate it. And I appreciate all our brother and sisters in law enforcement who did it before us, who did it while we were doing it, and who are doing it today to make sure our families are safe as we go forward.
Nice meeting you, Donna.
Nice meeting you, George. Be safe. Thank
Have
you.
a good day, everybody.
Thank you,
Bye.
Joe.
Thank you.
Bye-bye
Thank you.
now.
Joe. Bye.